And leave it to contrarian badass Reggie Middleton.
Now, at the time, you were the only analyst in the world to mention that it would starve the banks.
Reggie Middleton, who nailed Facebook, by the way.
I mean, not to be impolite, but what makes you so special that they all want to read your blog?
I can step on toes and be objective and offensively honest.
Greetings, this is Reggie Middleton. I'm doing this video to follow up on the video that I did yesterday. It was titled Bitcoin for Big Dummies, why the price is spiking and why it's not in a bubble. That threw off quite a few comments, about roughly 50 to 60 a day. Not a lot, but a lot for that particular topic, at least on my channel. And the comments were interesting. Some of them came from some pretty bright individuals. And I'd like to address some, particularly the ones that I feel were well written, but might not necessarily be on point. For instance, there's one, hi Reggie, I know you fancy yourself as a realist, but in all the videos and articles I've followed from you, you've never mentioned gold. Why do you suppose that central banks hold gold realistically? They own the government, which could crush BTC, which is Bitcoin in a flash. The CBs know exactly what is going on and won't be the losers in the shifting sands. Well, there are always losers and there's always winners, and there really is a perpetual winner. That's why things progress. As to how Bitcoin could be crushed is interesting. It's possible, but the historical methods of crushing new innovations, especially in the financial field, probably won't work with Bitcoin because of its technological base, primarily the cryptographic based network that is used to transmit the money, the wealth, etc. See, Bitcoin with a capital B, which is a transmission network, is a peer-to-peer system where you have a bunch of computers, say 7 million computers, and they communicate with each other directly when they each carry a piece of the whole. So when all these computers communicate directly, in order to take the message out, the communication out, you literally have to take out nearly all, if not all, the computers. There's no central server, a centralized database, or any center to attack, to regulate, to confiscate. So to shut it down would be relatively difficult. You have to shut down the actual peers. And that shut down actual peers takes a significant amount of influence, power, and a concerted effort, because these peers are global and they're worldwide. They're not in any particular town, city, state, geographic location, any particular sphere of influence or sovereign nation. Now, this is a very interesting comment that was read. Let me read it verbatim so I don't get the message lost in translation. A few observations, Mr. Middleton. First, the problem with your automobile analogy. I made an analogy of an automobile with Bitcoin in my previous video. Please see the video directly preceding this one, instead of having me go through it again. Who builds and maintains the exclusive road that your car may use? The roads that the rest of us use can be built with a monetary unit of account, Fiat, for public purpose. Could the same ever be said of Bitcoin, or for the Bitcoin alternative? And then he goes on to say, I don't see this as a remote possibility. Well, this is actually, I am loath to denigrate the question, but I can't say I understand it. First of all, the government, the public entity of the government builds the roads usually in the United States and many other sovereign nations. With Bitcoin, the roads are the pathways through the World Wide Web, built upon the internet protocol. So who builds the roads for Bitcoin? Well, the denizens of the web. Every server that is put up, right, makes a node to transmit additional information to another server and to another server. And these servers are internetworked, as in the web, which is why you get the World Wide Web. And that's how the web is built. Okay, the clients act as another node in the World Wide Web, and each client can talk to another client directly instead of going directly through the server. This helps to build the web, helps make the web what it is. So, his assertion is incorrect, in my humble opinion. And then he goes on to say, this leads to what I consider a primary weakness in the Bitcoin model. It's essentially a return to the gold standard by electronic means and would severely limit policy space for a democratic republic in a massively monetized economy. And this is where it gets good. Can Bitcoin, as presently constructed, fuel a federal job guarantee to provide a true living wage floor for those willing to work? How would a true single-payer universal health service be provided with Bitcoin? What about publicly provisioned education through graduate school at no charge for the citizens? I think you can see what I'm driving at here. All these policies require the services of a true central bank under democratic control, utilizing fiat, over which it maintains absolute sovereignty. Now, for those who are able to follow that, rather long sentence, and that's my fault, not his, what I have to say in return is, bullocks. Number one, central banks are not democratically controlled. A central bank is owned by the larger banks, at least for the US, the larger banks in the monetary system, the money center banks. So the central banks are owned by the JP Morgans and by the Morgans and the Citibanks and the Goldmans. Okay, the central banks are not democratically controlled. They're definitely not controlled by you and I. Okay, so his assertion is off, number one. Number two, we have this issue of, can Bitcoin, as presently constructed, fuel a federal job guarantee? No, it cannot, but neither can the US dollar. Okay, again, fiat dollars, US dollars, are simply small representations of value. Okay, each one represents a piece of an aggregate value. What the central banks are doing in trying to basically save their owners, which are the money center banks, after a large financial collapse, is they're multiplying these little individual representations of value. So they're taking $1 and they're making $6 out of it. Okay, that does not increase the value that individual dollar represents. It's simply taking that $1, dividing it into $6, and saying now we have $6 instead of $1, and we're going to spend $5 more on XYZ. But the case is, you only originally had $1 value to begin with. So now you have the $6, it's just 1/6 of the value that you had originally. So when they spend these $6 to help bail out the banks, what they're doing is they essentially are taking an economic loan from the future. Okay, an economic $5 loan from the future. That loan will be paid back most likely by your children. And the way the commenter is approaching the situation is as if the central bank is somehow getting $6 of value where there was $1 value. The only way to increase that $1 value to $2, $3, $4, $5, or $6 is to have an increase in economic activity. As a matter of fact, we've had decreases, not increases, since 2008, 2007. And that is one of the major misunderstandings I think many make. And if you study it, I think Satoshi, the supposed creator of Bitcoin, had that in mind when he created a finite and regular creation of Bitcoin. So you can't have a rampant QE, rampant inflation for the minority, which is the owners, or which are the owners of the central banks, at the expense of the majority, which would be the democracy if one did exist. Now we have the direct comparisons between Bitcoin and gold. Just to address this, again, since I'm not a Bitcoin bug or a gold bug, I'm going to come straight at you with this. The argument is, gold has thousands of years of history behind it. Gold has intrinsic value. Gold is held by the central banks, etc. No, this is true, okay, but the intrinsic value of gold is not what gold is traded on. The intrinsic value of gold is several dollars per ounce, whereas the actual market value of gold is over $1,000 an ounce. So you see the significant spread between the intrinsic value and the actual market value. Now, to put that in perspective, for those who say that Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value, I beg to differ. As a matter of fact, the argument can be made that Bitcoin's intrinsic value is greater than that of gold. In my reply here, I state where Bitcoin is portable, easily portable, where gold isn't. Now, there's no intrinsic value, but there is utility there. But Bitcoin is programmable, where gold isn't. Now, that's a very, very big point. You can take Bitcoin, you can send it to a receiver. You can say that receiver cannot redeem that Bitcoin until XYZ activity has been performed. You can have a third party who acts as a gatekeeper or as a referee to ascertain whether that activity was performed. And then you can have you have to have a uniform agreement between all three parties before the receiver of the Bitcoin can actually redeem it. That type of programmable liquidity, that type of activity is impossible to do with a dumb paper fiat currency. Absolutely impossible. That utility in itself is an intrinsic value, and one that doesn't exist in gold, doesn't exist in current fiat currency. Heretofore, before the programmable, the cryptographic currencies, to my knowledge, didn't exist at all. Now, the difference between the industrial intrinsic value of gold and the programmable value of the digital currencies is significant, particularly in this day and age of the internet and digital things. Now, the next question is, the next comment that I want to address is, who would accept Bitcoin with all, the coin's volatility? Well, the volatility that you see in Bitcoin is part and parcel of a new currency with a new economy, with a thin float, thinly traded. Bitcoin is very volatile, nosebleed. But then again, so was the predecessor to the US dollar, which was a continental note. It was very volatile, went up, went down, and eventually it was redeemable for only 1% of its face value. And that continental note was then replaced by the actual US dollar that we are using now. And you all know how deep and liquid the US dollar markets are. So you have the genesis, you have the birth, and you have to walk before you run. So Bitcoin is volatile. Bitcoin, the currency, does look bubblicious at times, but you have to look at it for what it is, a newborn currency. And more importantly, you have to look at it for what it is, a newborn digital currency with its own transmission system, which is the value add that I think most of the critics are missing. Now, I'm not a Bitcoin bug, I'm not a gold bug, I'm not any type of bug, I'm a risk-adjusted return bug. But with that in mind, you have to understand both the risks and the rewards, not just the risks.